Hello, hello, hello for the people joining us here at 180 Maiden Lane. My name is Indigo Sparks, and this is Studio Demo. Studio Demo is a broadcast hub featuring New Ink's wider creative community where conversations, demonstrations, and creative exchanges happen live. Our next talk, Sounds as Architecture, asks, how can sound function as architectural material? Pulling from Creative Times 2025 curatorial theme Sonic Commons, this talk explores the role that audio can play in relational, IRL experiences and looks at how sound can be used as a tool for understanding community, power, and care. Diya Vij is the curator at Creative Times. She launched CTHQ, a gathering space for art and political engagement, the R&D Fellowship for Socially Engaged Artists, relaunched the Creative Times Summit, and has realized several large-scale public art commissions. She has worked at major New York City institutions like the Queens Museum, the High Line, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, focusing on the role of public art in politics. Diya serves on the board of the Laundromat Project, Poetry Project, co-curated the 2023 Counter-Public Triennial, and more. Joining Diya is Anna Harsanyi, a curator, educator, and arts manager, currently serving as associate curator at Creative Time, where she helps organize CTHQ. Anna focuses on presenting art in non-art contexts and creating participatory spaces for diverse audiences. Anna has held education and public engagement roles at places like the Arts Encounter Biennial, MoMA, and the Guggenheim Social Practice Initiative. We also have Robert Sember, a member of the international sound art collective Ultra Red, known for developing collective listening practices that support anti-racist, housing justice, and migrant rights movements. He co-organized the Arbut Santana Ballroom Freedom and Free School during his Vera List Center Fellowship, creating political education spaces within the house and ballroom community. Robert works with various prison education initiatives and teaches at the New School's Eugene Lang College. You can learn more about them at demofestival.org. They're incredible. We're going to hear from them right now. Please help me welcome them to the stage. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diya Vij. I'm the curator at Creative Time.
Hi, I'm Anna Harsanyi. I'm associate curator at Creative Time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you to everyone at New Ink for this lovely invitation to be here today, and for all of the care and work that you've all put into this incredible Demo 2025. Meeting all the artists has been so incredible. Truly a wonderful, thoughtful group of people. And thank you to all of you for being here. Creative Time is a public art presenting organization since 1974. So for the past 50 years, we've realized large-scale, temporary, experimental public artworks by the leading contemporary artists of the time. Our work is grounded in a few core beliefs. Artists' voices shape society, and public spaces are places for creative and free expression. Because of this, we've organized over 350 boundary-pushing experimental public artworks across the city, the country, and the world. And in addition, in our recent history, we've created many initiatives to foster discourse and interdisciplinary collaborations within the intersection of public art practice and politics, like the 10-plus year running Creative Time Summit and a newer program of ours, CTHQ, Creative Time's 2-year-old gathering space for art and political engagement.
Together, Diya and I plan gatherings and participatory events at CTHQ weekly on Wednesday nights. This year, our gatherings, as well as our public art commissions, explore the theme of the Sonic Commons, and we're here today to share what we've learned so far. We're so glad to be joined by Robert Sember, who, as an artist and a member of Ultra Red, has been deeply influential to our work. Robert participated in the first event at CTHQ on January 22nd of this year, which delved into the politics of noise in the city, from protests to urban planning to policing to how we negotiate and share sonic spaces.
So we've spent this year thinking alongside artists, writers, urban planners, DJs, linguists, community organizers, young people, and other practitioners about what constitutes the sonic commons, or rather, how do we reckon with sound as a shaper of public space in everyday life? In an era filled with just so much noise and discord, we felt it was important for Creative Time to think together with our community about the texture of sounds and silences that form the urban landscape. Sound shapes our atmosphere, the ways we interact with each other, what we hear and don't hear, how we listen, and to what or to who. In the context of increasing political turmoil, unpredictability, and authoritarianism, through the Sonic Commons, we explore how the politics of sound can be understood as metaphors and tools to help us listen, decipher, decode, and aspirationally to move past this tumultuous moment. In a Sonic Commons, what is shared corresponds to what is heard, what is silenced, and what is amplified within our public spaces and our culture at large.
Guiding our explorations is a list of sonic fragments found in public space. We'd like to take a moment to read them together with you, and we invite you to let us know afterwards if there's ones we should add to the list. The summer anthem, the high heels clicking on the street, the cat call, the cackle, the small talk, the spontaneous street conversation, the shit talking, the low rider, the bird song within city green spaces, the protest slogan, the call and response, the collective song, the impetus to speak out, the notion that voices are heard, but is the hearing ever translated into action, the censored voices, the scream, the shout, the catatonic scream, the silence, the stillness, the saying something when seeing something, the public address, the sign language, the signage, the place names modified for colonial tongues, the codes, the slang, the diasporic dialects, the endangered languages, the underground codes, the busking, the rhythm of urban infrastructure, the phone sounds played out loud, the personal speakers, the thunder, the bass, the noise pollution, the noise ordinances, the alarms, the sirens, the screeching of a halt, the struggle to breathe deeply in a polluted cityscape, the right to breathe, air, the obstruction of breath, asthma, indigenous sonic agency, the noise, the rumbling, the telephone game, the prank call, the encrypted group chat, the urban legend, the rumors, the hysteria, the call to prayer, the call to action.
These fragments are examples of the kinds of sonic containers made by people, of the sonic architecture that constructs our effective material and physical relationships with sound. Architecture in and of itself is a practice that conceives of spaces that are built by relationships, not only of practical use, but of interpersonal dynamics that informs how an environment should be constructed. Sound is relational. It is shared. It doesn't know or respect borders. As hard as we try, it cannot be fully contained.
Gatherings are social architecture, and through those relations, they produce knowledge and inquiry. They are fundamental to socially engaged art practices. The intimate gatherings at CTHQ are necessary as building blocks that lead to large-scale public artworks, interventions, activations, and built spaces. This, too, can be thought of as a way to shape the built environment, the immaterial or social architecture of our shared spaces. Each CTHQ program is organized around either one or a set of these sonic fragments, and are mostly artist-led and experiment with forms of gathering. For Diya and I, gatherings or public programs allow us to do research out loud and to dig deeper into conceptual questions through social exchanges. What is the relationship between sound and power? This question has been a through line that we think about, and it feels particularly resonant as we discuss sound as architecture. We've invited over 75 creative practitioners in over 40 programs to answer and complicate these questions. And we'd like to share a sample of their responses now.
Places are created through people's uses of space, and much of that meaning is developed through the exchange of sound. Sound resonate, sounds ricochet off buildings. So much of urban planning is about excluding or buffering certain sounds that are deemed by a select few as unwanted or undesirable. But we're also living in conditions where we're more exposed to other people's sounds, which can then produce more conflict because we're not taught how to exist in spaces of dissonance. Kara Mitchell.
Sound is such an uncontainable thing, and even though there are, in theory, rules and regulations about sound, there's so much bleed and overlap so that neighboring spaces are infected by the sound around. I think of it as a relatively uncontrollable element of public space. So no matter how hard you try to manicure or design and control a space, that the sound is ultimately up to nature and the things and the people around it. Frank Heath.
New York City is not conducive to sound. The buildings create this feedback. It's so hostile to sound, it just bounces back. Everything bounces back right at you. It doesn't feel good. Samantha Riot.
What I or we might do as improvisers and composers in a sonic space is to connect to the music that is already happening and to try to catch it. From my perspective as a trans person, there is this ongoing practice of trying to craft something beautiful from those crumbling edges as they fall, so much so of our world. Our sense of safety, of expectation and predictability. And when the edges of our realities start to disintegrate and fall away, we can still find a way to make something really beautiful from that. Yunia Eddie Kwan.
The relationships that you may have been engaged with in the Tompkins Square bathrooms are never verbal. They're always about looking a certain way and signaling a certain way, and thus knowing what you want without any form of communication. So I think silence is definitely a queer strategy, and one that has been employed in public for a very long time. Carlos Mota.
The bigger the sound, the more power. When I'm out there either organizing or doing a protest, I make sure we're loud because that's where people are like, holy shit, look at this power these people have because we're loud and we're making a lot of noise. DJ Syntronics, aka Dave Syntron.
Musical accompaniment. The sound of songs in the first Intifada, the songs that we play here at CTHQ at your beautiful space, those are also the sounds that we were not allowed to listen to and we couldn't hear. We wanted to hear those sounds because those are the sounds that separate us from being controlled or being under occupation. We wanted to break through our cage of the sound that is scary, the sound of poets. Khalid Jarrar.
The struggle to control and define noise is not only about sound, but it is fundamental to the instrumentalization of power. Those who are relegated to noise or described as noisy, the unheard, by listening to noise itself, engaging with what has been pushed to the background, be they the clicks of electromagnetic interference, an echo bouncing off the wall, the whistle sibilance of a voice, or the screech of a hydraulic door breacher. We reclaim the noise into sites of signification in the pursuit of justice, or what could otherwise be called evidence. Lawrence Abu Hamdan.
There's a kind of tyrannical silence that is used to cloak the movements of power in some way. So I would say that there's the power that comes with sound, but I would be most interested and concerned about the power that is veiled, that is silenced, and that is concealed. Then there's the requirement of a kind of speech of complicity, the speech of echoing. Who gets to speak and who is heard speaking is who gets to be silent and whose silence is in fact respected and affirmed. The right to remain silent, but also to dissent in silence. Robert Sember. And with that, we'll turn it over to Robert.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for introducing this and setting it up. If you will permit me, I am going to play a little bit of my educator role today, and I'd like to just offer a few theorizations of this question of sound, relation, and space. We very seldom get to talk about sound in this concerted way, and so I'd like to just try and share some of the languages and the terms that we who are immersed in the sound studies field get to use. I've composed 4 openings. I think we might get through 3. We'll see how we go. So the first one I call opening 1, speaking and speakers, or acoustic and amplified voices. When the Occupy Wall Street movement settled into Zuccotti Park, not far from here, the NYPD banned the use of amplified sound. The people's mic was used to carry statements across large crowds. Beginning with those closest to the speaker, concentric circles of people repeated what was said, phrase by phrase. This slow repetition is remembered as a form of listening, mutual aid, and direct action. The sound of the people's mic carried more than the words and meanings of the speakers that they amplified. It included the pitch, resonance, and musicality of different voices, a condition of diversity, the rhythmic pauses before and after each statement, a kind of collective choreography, and the ambience of the location. This immersive soundscape was a sonic occupation that announced and affirmed the presence as resistance. After visiting Zuccotti Park during the occupation, Michael Kimmelman, the New York Times architectural critic, wrote of Aristotle's claim that the size of an ideal polis, places of civic gathering, extended to the limits of a herald's cry. That is, Aristotle linked the human voice to civic participation and face-to-face conversation. Architecture, it follows, should conform to this need, to the dimensions of the voice. This is an issue of scale, which is also an issue of power. Amplification affects scale and power. The loudspeakers used at the Nazi Party rallies in Nuremberg enfolded crowds numbering in the tens of thousands. It's likely that no speech had ever before reached such distance and with such force. The philosopher Martin Heidegger described the rallies as organized screaming, which was the point, explained Albert Speer, the chief architect of the Third Reich. For Speer, amplified sound was essential to the architecture of dictatorship. The citizen is one who listens and identifies with the call or scream of the state and its apparatus. Gunther Anders, a student of Heidegger's, warned, "When the world speaks to us without our being able to speak to it, we are condemned to be unfree." Organized screaming leaves little room for dissent. Opening 2, Flesh and Virtual Space, or the Broadcast. In 1877, Thomas Edison recorded himself saying hello. When he listened to the recording, he was, quote, taken aback. The apparatus did not hear him as he heard himself. His object voice, he then realized, would travel independently of him across time and space, eventually functioning as an archival afterlife in which strangers might hear his voice without listening to him. We call this the acousmatic, the separating of sound from its source, from its time, and from its place. Acousmatic objects, or recorded sound, like photographs, are mechanically reproducible. Walter Benjamin, many of you will be aware of, famously theorized that their potentially endless reproducibility erodes the object's aura, its connection to the time, place, and significance of its production and life. This loss includes the social organization that propagated the object in the first place. Unmoored and alienated, object fragments are co-opted, commodified, reinterpreted, and consumed. This is a trade in the aesthetics of alienation. Displaced sounds displace. Yet, Benjamin goes on to suggest the loss of aura might also be liberatory, for it dissolves normative systems of making and property. The contradictions of acousmatic sound is constitutive of contemporary civic soundscapes. In other words, sound, like every other aesthetic medium, is conditioned by the dialectics of modernity. That is the tension between industrialized alienation, mechanical reproduction, in tension with the flow of life. The desires and experiences of living, or what is called spiritual yearning. I think, for example, of sound baths, gatherings that strive to alter or relieve us of our conventional experience of time and space. And there's also the cadre of site recording hobbyists and technicians who have accumulated millions of gigabytes of sound. These practices are narrated in endless Reddit discussion groups regarding fidelity and the potential for immersive belonging if only we have the right microphones and the right headphones. In the early 20th century, there was extensive discussion of how radio broadcast would influence space-time and foster fascism. Certainly, fascist movements in Spain, Italy, and Germany weaponized the radio. Gunther Anders' writing in the 1930s was one of the first to theorize broadcast radio. He suggested that radio broadcasts produce schizoid topic, acoustic experiences. For example, he described the receding sounds of the radio in his apartment as he left and walked down the hallway, and then began to hear other radios playing the same sounds in other apartments. It's a kind of spatial blurring in which he is here in his apartment building and in the topography of the broadcast, the space of the sound. Anders laments that the world is now half present and half absent. In other words, phantom-like, and we too become phantoms. Opening 3. Experience or listening as context. I've been given the sound signal, and so this may be an abbreviated opening. The turn to phenomenology, the philosophy of experience, is one of the ways in which this modernist dialectic is activated. Phenomenology is the reaction to the reductive mechanized psychology of the late 19th century. It reframes the sensual as always already interdependent. For example, Gaston Bachelard urges us to stop describing landscapes and rather bring their movements to life by listening. Sound is time, and when we listen, landscapes and architecture become events rather than objects. I think of Daniel Kish, who has been blind since early childhood. He uses echolocation, a stream of improvised clicking sounds made with his tongue, to experience and navigate the world. His listening is so keen that he registers in the echoes both the placement and quality of the objects that surround him. Phenomenologists assert that we listen not merely with our ears or even with our minds, but also with our bodies and with the world around us. This is Kish's practice. I'm going to try to briefly outline 3 activations of this phenomenological recuperation of the relationship to the world, and of course to one's embodiment, through the acousmatic object. The first is the practice of musique concrète, in which fragments of sound on tape, removed from their source, become objects. Pierre Schaeffer, who is most associated with this, codified these sound objects by their qualities and began to produce compositions that were literally about pasting together, repeating, or other ways altering these fragments of tape. This hands-on making is what is the concrète in musique concrète. He was also very interested in a kind of scientific study of perception. And the studio became almost a scientific laboratory in which he attempted to bracket all of the surrounding sort of social intrusions into practices of listening in order to arrive at a kind of phenomenological essence, the soundness of sound. The risk in this is, of course, the modernist paradox or tautology. Every sound object then becomes simply the reasserting of a question: what is sound? What is listening? It loses its context and we are left to be in a kind of constant abstraction. Let me close by talking very briefly about what ultra-red does. We work with sound, with collective listening. In this sense, a group of listeners become the context, a resituating of sound. This is done in order to promote a kind of defamiliarized investigations of the conditions of struggle. So we might, for example, ask, what is the sound of gentrification? What is the sound of precarity? Rather than having people repeat what is already known, the project is to go and record the sounds of those issues in the places in which people live. This requires a set of decisions, an inquiry into the space and the flow of everyday life. When those sounds are listened to together and reflected on, that community then begins to hear its experiences, but also to hear the different modes of listening that it engages in. This has become foundational, for example, to the formation of the Los Angeles Tenants Union, which is now the largest tenants union in the United States. It was through the practice that we call the School of Echoes that the formative work was done through sound in order to produce those relationships that could then be mobilized into action. I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Come visit us at CTHQ. We have calendars floating around every Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Give them another round of applause, please. One more. Thank you.